The Formaggio family history. It's a long history. Started out in the very late 20s. My grandfather came from Naples, Italy, and his trade was a tinsmith. He made what's called metal ricotta cans of years ago. And ricotta cans of years ago had holes in them, so when you hot dip the ricotta in the can, the whey would come out. It's just a natural process of separating the curds and the whey, or the ricotta, from the whey. My father, going with his father into all these mozzarella factories that made mozzarella and ricotta, because they go together, would see men painstakingly making fresh mozzarella by hand. Well, to make fresh mozzarella by hand, you got to bring the core temperature of the cheese up to 130 degrees. Well, today we have chemistry that's very precise, and years ago they did not. So the curd could be a little bit green, and all that meant was the pH was off a little bit. So you'd have to add a little bit more hot water. But the only way to make it was completely and utterly by hand. And these guys would have their hands in there molding this mozzarella, and the mozzarella makers' hands of years ago were full of calluses and lumps and bumps and all kinds of things that you would say, my gosh, what a tough job you have. My dad set out to do one thing, and he did it successfully. He created the very first automated mozzarella machine in the history of the United States. That was an incredible achievement for him. And my father always kept that way, but he was a machinist. He wasn't a cheesemaker. But in order to make equipment that could make cheese, you had to be a cheesemaker at heart. You had to understand how you could take that industry and automate it in such a way as he did. So when I left college, spent a year and a half there only because I promised my mom I'd go, I realized I was wasting my time, and I wanted to get my hands into business. And I chose to stick with a business that was true to my roots. And I became a cheesemaker. I went ahead and started to do something that I loved to do. And that's a lucky thing for me. And the reality is, when I left college and I went to work for someone, I was lucky enough, and I found a job working with someone who made cheese. And I learned, you know what I learned? All the wrong things to do. So when I opened my own company, when I was 26 years old, I knew what the right thing was to do. But I set off in a business that was very competitive. And the reality was, competitive businesses are everywhere. So I spoke to my pop, who was my mentor. He wasn't my partner. And I said, Pop, I'm having a hard time. I can't seem to make any money and make any headway in any sales because it's just too busy out there and too much competition. He said that's because you're selling products that everybody else sells, and you need to develop your own. And I said, you're right. So I went ahead and I started creating products completely outside the box. I went into the stores and I paid attention to what people did at store level with mozzarella. And I paid attention to what consumers did with mozzarella when they brought it home. And the reality is that taking all of that knowledge and putting it into a ready-to-serve package for a consumer to walk up and take was the key to my success in business. And that's a tip for anybody that's in business. And Formaggio has grown from a little garage in Brooklyn that was only 60 feet deep by 30 feet wide to a 60,000 square foot facility employing over 100 people. I'm very proud of what I've done, but there's some major rules that I never forget. Quality means everything.